guys, Tonic here, and today I'd like to talk about some legendary effects that I think could use a buff. For as long as I can remember, bloodied, anti-armor, quad, and vampire weapons have pretty much dominated the Fallout 76 meta. They've almost always been the most sought after legendary effects for weapons, but I think it would be super neat if some of the effects that no one really uses got a buff. This would allow for tons of new viable builds, and it could really switch up the current playstyle of Fallout 76. So in today's video, I want to take a look at 5 different legendary weapon effects that could use a buff. But before we get into that, I would like to thank today's video sponsor, Opera GX. Opera GX is a special version of the Opera browser built specifically for gamers. One thing I love about Opera GX is the amount of customization available. You can easily set your own themes and even your own animated wallpaper. On top of that, the Opera GX sidebar lets you quickly browse apps like Discord or Twitter, control your music on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Music, and you can even log into your Twitch accounts directly from the sidebar and get a notification when your favorite streamers go live. Opera GX is also available on mobile devices, and it can be connected directly to the desktop version. So what are you waiting for? Download Opera GX today for free by using my link down below. And again, a huge thank you to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. But getting right back to it, first up we have to talk about the Berserker's effect. This effect is more damage the lower your damage resistance. So pretty much the less armor you wear, the more damage you will do. Now currently this is an extremely high risk and low reward effect. It almost sounds like it should be used in a similar way to bloodied builds, sort of like a glass cannon type thing, where you are at a much higher risk but you do more damage. However, it's pretty much useless compared to bloodied builds right now because the damage maxes out at plus 50% damage, whereas a bloodied weapon maxes out at plus 95% damage, and bloodied builds get all the benefits of wearing legendary armor pieces. Now sure, 50% damage is decent, and in the lower levels it actually might be pretty nice because you won't have the best armor right away, but still I think it's very underpowered and I would love to see that damage bonus boosted a bit, maybe to plus 100%. Because that would be an extremely fun endgame build. You could run around with no armor, completely unprotected, but you could still put out some pretty good damage. I think just boosting that damage will be enough to make this effect something worth using. You could make an entire build around the effect, and it could easily become a viable endgame weapon to use. And it could also fit right in with the other top tier effects that we have right now. I think that would be an awesome change, and I would definitely try running a Berserker's build if it got a buff. Now this next one is actually going to be several effects sort of clumped into one, and that is the Ghoul Slayers, Exterminators, Hunters, Troubleshooters, Zealots, and Mutant Slayers effects. All of these legendary effects pretty much work the exact same. They all give you a plus 50% damage to a specific enemy type, so for example the Mutant Slayers will give you plus 50% damage against Super Mutants, Ghoul Slayers gives you plus 50% damage against ghouls, and so on. And again, a 50% damage bonus is pretty solid, but still whenever I get these weapons they are almost instantly turned in for scrip. But I think they could become usable weapons and extremely rare and pricey weapons if they were to add an XP boost with the effect. For example, imagine if the Mutant Slayer's effect not only gave you a plus 50% damage bonus, but also a 50% XP bonus when killing super mutants. That one small change would make these weapons great for farming XP, and I would actually go out there and try and find a Godroll Mutant Slayer's fixture just to take on West Tech XP farming runs. Now a 50% boost might be a bit much, maybe it's more realistic if it's a 25% boost, but still if they were to implement that change, I believe the prices of these weapons would skyrocket in player vendors, and people would actually want to keep them and use them instead of just getting rid of them without a second thought. Up next, let's talk about Nocturnal weapons. The Nocturnal effect increases damage during the night, and during the day the damage drops back to normal. And not that long ago they actually used to get a debuff during the daytime where the damage would drop below base damage, but that daytime debuff was removed to try and make these weapons better. But still, whenever I get a Nocturnal weapon, I just scrip it at a nearby train station. They're just not very good currently, but I would love to see them get another buff. It is a neat effect, and I think the concept of it is really cool, so for a fix, I think it would be neat if Nocturnal weapons also got a buff while being in shadows, similar to how the Covert Scout armor works. That armor gets a buff to its stealth when you are in dark areas, and I think it would be super neat if that was also integrated into the Nocturnal weapons. So if you were sneaking in the shadows through a building or hiding away from the light, you could still get that damage bonus. They still wouldn't be the best weapons, but I think that would make them a lot better, and it would actually be a pretty fun playstyle, just trying to stay in the shadows all the time and looking for the darkest paths possible while doing quests or exploring. I think that would be awesome to see Nocturnal weapons become something worth using, and overall I think it would just be a great simple addition to make these weapons decent and stay in a lot of players' inventories. Next up, I think the Stalker's effect could use a slight buff. Stalker's weapons are decent right now already, but still I find myself getting rid of them whenever I get one, and I don't really ever have a use for them. The Stalker's effect is if not in combat, plus 100% VATS accuracy at 50% AP cost. The weapons that pair best with this effect tend to be bows, crossbows, black powder rifles, and mostly any single shot weapon. And as you can see right here in this comparison, it just doubles the VAT hit chance, and it will only work if you are hidden. Once you go into caution, the effect will stop working. So for a buff, I think it would be super neat if when you are hidden, you also get an increased sneak attack damage multiplier by 1. So for example, this is 2.5, and if this buff were applied, it could go up to 3.5. This will make these weapons super strong when out of combat and attacking from a distance, but after you would fire your first shot and go into caution, the sneak damage multiplier would stop working with the other effects, and you would have to try and sneak out of caution back to being hidden. This would allow for some real viable endgame sniper character builds that focus on maxing out weapon range and attacking from a great distance, and I think it would just be really fun to use, because it would be extremely strong from a distance, but when you get close to enemies or rushed by enemies, it would pretty much just become a normal weapon. Lastly, let's talk about the Instigating effect. Now, Instigating honestly is pretty good as it is. I used to run an Instigating hunting rifle when I started playing, and I absolutely loved it. It was great against most smaller enemies, and as I leveled up, I tried really hard to get an Instigating fixer, and I used it with a rifleman build until around level 150 maybe. It was solid and it did the job well, but there was always one thing that would happen to me that made me stop using that weapon. The Instigating effect is double damage if target is full health, and it works great on rifleman builds and single shot weapons. However, if the target receives any amount of damage before you attack, then the effect is completely useless. So for example, I always used to run into situations where a super mutant would kill a rad roach, but the rad roach could get one hidden and the super mutant would be at like 98% health, and then the effect would become useless on that enemy because something else had damaged it first. I would run into this problem all the time during quests and during events when someone would maybe be using explosive weapons that tagged a group of enemies. That small bit of damage instantly just ruins the legendary effect for those targets. After playing for a long time with those weapons, I ran into that issue so much that I just wound up putting all my Instigating stuff away and switching to anti-armor weapons. So for a slight buff, I think it would be absolutely amazing if instead of doing double damage if target is full health, it became double damage on the first hit. This would make it so you don't have to worry about the enemy getting tagged by a teammate first or a rad roach hitting them for 2 damage, and I really think that it would add a lot to those weapons. But again, the Instigating effect is pretty good as it is, and it's already up there with some of the best legendary effects. This change is just something that I've wanted for a long time. But those are pretty much all of the legendary effects for weapons that I think could use a buff. And I think most of these buffs are in the realm of possibility, because not that long ago Nocturnal weapons received a buff where the daytime debuff was removed, and sure, that's not a massive buff by any means, but it does make the weapon a bit better, and that's really what we're going for here. We just want these weapons to be a little bit better, because right now I feel like Fallout 76 really lacks in build diversity, especially in the endgame. Most endgame players just use bloodied weapons, anti-armor, quad, vampires, and sometimes junkies weapons, but there are so many legendary effects in this game, and some of them are pretty neat, but a lot of them aren't nearly as good as the top tier ones, so I would love to see some buffs added so that we can have some new, interesting, fun builds to mix up the current meta a bit. But now I'd like to ask you, what legendary effects do you think need a buff, if any at all, and what would you change about them? I think it's a really interesting topic, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so let me know down in the comments below. And I would like to say thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I really do appreciate it. And as always, I'd like to give a massive thank you to all of the channel members: Loopy, Joe Pervincente, Adam Steinson, Terry Lockridge, Zapper, Robert Kennard, CRM114, Theodore, Slappy Sauce, King Kittens, Omniprotus, Victrix, Argent Deer, Shaky Hands Workshop, Axel, Kevin W, Anna S, Fallout McFly, Networkgate, Golty, Lanthar, Captain Awesome, Citizen Girl, Heather Henderson, Patrick Ruda, 23 Ice Fire, Jay Smith, Bowser Double Frang, Christy Mellon Schwitz. Thank you guys so much. I love you guys, and have a great day.